Hello A2s, welcome to Infradian rhythms. So you've looked at circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are a 24-hour long cycle, circa about day and day. Infradian rhythms are anything over 24 hours, and already we've touched on a few very briefly touched on a few different types of rhythms that are over 24 hours. You do not need to know about exogenous site gabers and endogenous pacemakers for this one. However, when we go through the video, you might be able to identify elements that are exogenous site gabers that influence an infradian rhythm and exogenous site gabers that influence the circadian rhythm. The way I remember that infradian rhythms are over 24 hours is because next week you'll look at ultradian rhythms, and that is U for ultradian, U for under 24 hours. So circa circadian, about a day, ultradian, U for ultradian, U for under, and then infradian's the only ones left, so over, longer than 24 hours. And then one of the key ones, of course, is in females there is the monthly rhythm is the menstrual cycle. And there's a YouTube video there that explains it really nicely, so you could look at that. I'd refresh your memory. I think for most of you it's looking back on GCSE biology, or possibly might touch on it if you look at it in A-level as well. Which you will all be better at than I am, so potentially you could even I've checked this as closely as I can, but if you do spot any errors, please let me know. There will be we'll call that bonus points. So we've got that the pituitary gland releases FSH and LH, and an egg starts to grow. Okay, and as the egg grows, estrogen is produced, and that stops the FSH and increases the LH, which causes ovulation. Then when the egg is not fertilized, that decreases estrogen and progesterone, and that brings on the period. Okay, and it goes round in a cycle like that. So after the period, the pituitary gland releases FSH, and so on. So moving round in that cycle. So I would encourage you to have some awareness, not a huge detailed awareness, but you could be asked up to a 4-mark question, I would say, on infradian rhythms. Technically, officially, you could be asked a 16-mark question. So you do want to have enough knowledge for 6A01, but I do think a 4-marker would be more likely. I'm saying that very cautiously, just in case, because you really could potentially get a 16-marker on this one. And of course, all the things we've talked about there, the pituitary gland, the hormones inside the body, estrogen, progesterone, they are all endogenous pacemakers. So generally we would argue that mostly the human menstrual cycle is regulated by endogenous pacemakers. There is also a suggestion, new pieces of research coming through, that males also have a monthly cycle as well, and that fits with levels of testosterone in the body. So you do find at various times in the month that testosterone in males peaks at certain points and dips at certain points, and people have called that the male menstrual cycle as well. Another type of cycle that's an infradian rhythm that's an annual cycle is the seasons. So an annual rhythm, another infradian rhythm, is the body's response to the yearly changes in the seasons, and this is to do with melatonin. So as you know that with melatonin, the more light there is, the less melatonin there is, or the more darkness there is, the more melatonin there is. So in the summer, you don't use as much melatonin, whereas in the winter, your body produces a lot more melatonin. And this is significant because melatonin is made from serotonin. And as you know, serotonin, it supports depression, and mood in people. So in the summer, there will be more serotonin available because it's not being used to make melatonin, because there's more light, so you don't need melatonin. Whereas in the winter, there's lots more darkness, so more melatonin is produced, and that melatonin eats away at, metabolizes, uses serotonin, so you have less serotonin, and that could explain a condition called seasonal affective disorder, but we'll save that for AO3. And there's some information there, a news article about the SERT, serotonin, the SERT gene as well, which might be of interest, and there's a bit more detail. So if you're struggling with that idea of serotonin and melatonin, I'd recommend having a read of that as well. There is a piece of research by McClintock that is supporting evidence for circadian rhythms, but it's supporting evidence for exogenous site gabers and infradian rhythms. So it suggests McClintock, and there's more detail in the book if you want to have a look at it, but he took sweat from donor donor people, essentially donor women, on the first day of their cycle, and a sweat swab on the second day, and the third day, and the fourth day, and the fifth day, and so on. And then he worked with a small sample of people who had irregular periods, and he would rub the sweat which had been treated, so it was just the hormones left in there that had been treated, onto the lip of these sample of people with irregular periods. And he found that by placing the donor hormones onto the people with irregular periods, that their periods regulated. So that would suggest that exogenous site gabers, cues from other people, biological cues that are given off by other people, can regulate. And there is a myth that female friends, if they spend a lot of time together, then their cycles regulate. So that supports the idea of an infradian rhythm that exists. It supports an idea of one that's controlled by exogenous site gabers. Practical applications is phototherapy, so that's a treatment for SAD. So seasonal affective disorder is when people experience increased amounts of depression or become depressed during the winter, and that could be linked to the fact that there's lots of light, lots of darkness, so lots of melatonin, so not much serotonin. And phototherapy is buying a SAD light. You can buy a SAD light, and it's where you shine the light in your face for a period of time in the day, in the morning, and you can also have alarm clocks that gradually the way they wake you up. There's a noise at the end, but about an hour before, gradually it lights up, so you feel like you're waking up with the sunrise, even if you're waking up earlier than the sunrise. And that's supposed to obviously reduce the amount of melatonin, therefore increasing the amount of serotonin. So it's a practical application. A problem with the research is there can be some confounding variables. So for example, with McClintock's research, there were confounding variables. Ooh, that doesn't fit with McClintock's research. That's something else. That's interesting. I will need to confirm about the I have to check that one with the evaluation points. I don't want to delay this video being sent out anymore, so I will continue, but I will need to say you'll only have 3 evaluation points for the lesson, but I will check about that evaluation of methodology one. Apologies, that's from circadian rhythms. And then there is also an alternative explanation. So an alternative explanation of SAD is actually it's a result of a disrupted circadian rhythm, not an infradian rhythm. So it's not necessarily to do with the seasons, and it's more of a focus on so less of a focus on the over a 24-hour cycle, so an infradian rhythm, but ultimately circadian rhythms are affected. So it's a disruption in your circadian rhythms, and particularly in the fact your endogenous pacemakers are used to particularly long nights in the summer, and then as the lights starts to go, then you can almost experience jet lag, because your body thinks, well, it should still be light, I should still be awake, but the exogenous site gabers, your light is telling you that really you should be asleep because it's much, much later at night. So if you ever look out the window in the winter and go, oh my goodness, it's really dark and I didn't expect it to be, that would be because you're almost experiencing that jet lag. Your endogenous pacemaker is saying, well, normally we're up at this time, normally lights around, but your exogenous site gaber is clashing with that because it's actually dark. There you go, similar to jet lag. So that's an alternative explanation that actually the focus could be around circadian rhythms, not infradian rhythms. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, and we'll have a look at ultradian rhythms next week.